So why is coffee beneficial? It comes down to the polyphenols. There's something called chlorogenic acids. There's just little different types of phytochemicals, which is nutrients, because it's a plant, that are in the coffee that have antioxidant impacts. And antioxidants are really good for going and protecting your cells against damage that might be hitting them and causing them to turn into more cancerous cells. Helps your cells to heal better. Antioxidants help with being anti-inflammatory. So that's why we think that, especially when people are drinking so many cups of coffee on a regular basis, they're getting an antioxidant boost from their coffee, having a lot of benefits when it comes to helping to prevent cancer. It can also potentially support liver detox pathways, but overall, it's mainly the antioxidant impact from the coffee beans, the plants that's in it, that has this anti-cancer impact. So I'm just going to cut right to the chase with this episode. Coffee has actually been shown to help fight against cancer. So if that's all you kind of tuned in for, then you don't have to stay for the whole episode if you don't want to. But what I will cover in more detail is basically how can we make the coffee work for us even better, even more. Kind of what do we want to look for in our coffee? I'm going to go through coffee hygiene, how to not have any negative impacts from it or fewer negative impacts from it, because there's definitely some negative impacts that have been researched as well. And basically, how do we make it work the best for our health? What to kind of look for in your coffee to make it even cleaner. That's what I kind of want to cover today, but I didn't want to keep you hanging out if you just wanted to know, does coffee cause cancer or not? In the big scheme of things, in all of the research, we do see that across the board, coffee is typically safe and potentially even a benefit against fighting against cancer. There is potentially some studies in like stomach cancer where it's not so great, but it's not that the coffee causes stomach cancer or even esophageal cancer. It's that someone with these potential predispositions or acidic problems having coffee, the acidicness of the coffee most likely makes the environment worse, more conducive to causing cancer to grow and start. But when we look at colorectal, breast, even lung cancer, endometrial cancer, we do see that coffee potentially has benefits in those types of cancers, which is really great because coffee is actually the second most consumed beverage in the world outside of water. But I feel like water gets a little boost there because there's water in coffee. So how do you really determine between the two? And I always get mad at my husband where I'm like, have you had any water today? He's like, I've had like 3 coffees. There's water in coffee. And I'm like, whatever. I'm like, you're my anti-patient. I can't really help you there. But if you are looking for some help, let's go through this episode here. The other reason I want to go through this episode on coffee is because I know a lot of people, once they've had a cancer diagnosis, they feel like a lot changes for them and you have to give up a lot of things. And there's a lot of food fear, food confusion. And I can just picture someone sitting down to enjoy their cup of coffee and it's nice and quiet and peaceful. And then they look in their cup and they're excited, but then they think, is this going to give me cancer? Has this caused cancer to start? Is this what caused me to get the cancer diagnosis? And I just don't want you to have that fear. So I hope just hearing that the research shows that cancer can actually be beneficial helps you to get back to enjoying your coffee first thing in the morning. I have friends who are like, I can't wait to go to bed so that I can drink my coffee the next morning because it's just such a nice thing for them to do. It's just a nice process to sit and enjoy your coffee. So I want to go through how do we make the coffee work even more for you and what kind of can we do with certain types of purchases of coffee and things like that. So that's what we're covering. I have basically 4 frameworks, I guess we could call them, to go through, 4 considerations to go through, not necessarily rules, but whether you're purchasing your coffee or considering the timing of your coffee, that's what we're going to talk about right now. So let's start with organic versus not organic coffee. Overall, if we're just looking at the research, we do see that the research is not getting picky between organic or not organic. And they're just saying across the board that coffee, you drink coffee and it has benefits against cancer. But to take it one step further, we do advise our clients typically to choose more organic types of coffee. The reason being that the coffee crops are typically heavily sprayed. And whenever we're consuming 1 to 4 cups of something a day on a regular basis, daily basis for years to go, basically, if we can just do this one thing where we switch coffee to organic, potentially we could be lowering our environmental exposure quite drastically. Now, that being said, it's not like there's a lot of research showing that basically the food that are heavily sprayed that we eat more regularly tends to increase cancer risk. But I still feel like there's a lot that we don't know about cancer, how it starts, how it grows. And if we can just kind of make this one simple switch where we're getting people to go from just conventional, non-organic coffee to organic, and if it's something they're eating quite regularly or drinking quite regularly, then why the heck not? Why don't we just do that to just limit one bigger exposure, one more concentrated exposure, I guess, just regular exposure to environmental contaminants. So if we can get you to go organic, go for it. Now, I would say like sometimes the client would be like, I just got a giant bag of my favorite coffee. Do I need to go and throw that out and get something right away? I'm like, no, you can finish off your coffee, but just consider that moving forward, let's get you organic. Or they're like, I enjoy a Starbucks now and then. Can I go do that? And I'm like, well, yeah, for sure. As long as the regular habit that you're doing at home is mostly the organic stuff, then that's a great start. We get to talk a little bit about microplastics potentially in the coffee mugs, and I asked them to bring a travel mug with them, but that can be a time for another episode. Maybe I'll get like an environmental expert in to come talk about microplastics. But overall, if you can consume an organic coffee, that would be a kind of step above what the research says. So it's kind of like that holistic spin. The other thing I want to talk about, the other consideration, is about mold and mycotoxins. Just like how I just saying about organic, where the research across the board is just looking at coffee and it having benefit, and it's not picking between mold, mycotoxin, organic, whatever it might be, then this is just the extra layer of cushion support, basically. So if we can look for third-party tested, mold-free, mycotoxin-free coffee, then that's just, again, going to give us a little additional boost to the good quality of our coffee and lessening any potential downsides that the coffee might give you. Why are mold and mycotoxin problems with cancer? Basically, these can have an immune suppressing impact on your health. And if we're suppressing the immune system, then we're taking away one of our largest defenses against finding and fighting cancer cells before they become a real big problem, or even precancer cells. So our damaged cells, they get picked up and identified by the immune system, and they get targeted and removed from our body before they can go and cause more trouble, potentially turning into cancerous cells down the road. So if mold, mycotoxin I kind of picture it like they're taking up the time of our immune system, where our immune system has to go and find and fight the mold and mycotoxins and get rid of them. So then the cancer cells can kind of sneak around and start their own posse of things. But if we're not having mold, mycotoxins in the body, then the immune system's still on high alert. It's still able to take care of any potential precancer cancer cells. It takes care of your body. So again, we're going to look for organic if we can. We're going to look for mold or mycotoxin tested. And we don't need to be extra concerned if we're out and about enjoying our day and we just want this nice cup of coffee. If you can do mostly this at home, then you're fighting most of the battle here. You're getting most of the impact of the coffee. Now, the third thing is kind of something I've learned the hard way, and it's about looking for caffeine sensitivity and trying to figure out if you are sensitive to caffeine or not. And the reason being that outside of cancer, the caffeine can have negative impacts on your body. And not that caffeine and coffee causes negative impacts on cancer, but outside of cancer, if we're looking at other health conditions when it comes to coffee, the caffeine can potentially raise blood pressure. It can definitely cause anxiety. It can definitely impact people's sleep. We have research showing that coffee can do that. The thing that we can look at, though, is something called the CYP1A2 gene. I don't know if you guys are interested in epigenetics at all, but we do a lot of epigenetic testing. And one of the genes that we'll look at is CYP1A2. And we're looking at the A form, which would be more of a rapid metabolizer. And then the F form, which would be more of a slow metabolizer. So a rapid metabolizer actually has a higher tolerance to the caffeine. They would have less impacts from the caffeine, so they wouldn't necessarily experience the anxiety, the sleep issues, the high blood pressure. Whereas a person with a slow metabolism of coffee, which is totally me, would have that impact. So, for example, I've had to completely cut out coffee from my diet, I guess we call it. I'm not a very anxious person, but as soon as I have caffeine, I can feel the difference in my thought processes, in my heartbeat, basically, in how I'm feeling in my core. It just makes me feel like I'm on edge and I should be looking out for danger, basically. And it's mild, but it's there enough to impact the calmness of my day. And I would challenge you guys to look at yourself. Do you have anxiety at all? Are you experiencing it even just due to a cancer diagnosis, which is totally normal? Cutting out coffee might be one of the best things you can do for your mental health. It really has a lot of research on how cutting out coffee in people who have anxiety can really lower their anxiety, no matter what it's caused by. So again, if you are feeling anxiety from your coffee, your caffeine, you're potentially likely a slow metabolizer if you've ever had any of that epigenetic testing done before. So go see if you can figure that out and read your results and find out, does coffee have this impact on me? Then it might be a really great idea for you to cut it out. Look for alternatives, and some alternatives that we've had people try out are like a mushroom coffee or a dandelion root coffee. Not gonna lie, I don't like them. They are not coffee. They do not taste like coffee. They are just a warm drink replacement. And if you do like them, then keep doing them. But personally, the taste is not the same as coffee. So if you're expecting to have a cup of mushroom coffee and have it taste like coffee, you're going to be a little bit disappointed at least. But you can give it a try if you're just looking for the habit of the ritual of sitting down to a nice warm cup of coffee or a drink. Then try a mushroom coffee or a dandelion root, or go to good old fashioned tea, which is what I drink now. You could also look into decaffeinated coffees. So what we typically advise is that people look for Swiss water decaf. This just the removal of the caffeine is a little bit different than non-Swiss water decaf, so just typical decaffeinated coffee. Whereas the caffeine gets removed without the solvents. It's just a different way that the caffeine is removed. So again, you're not having more, and I hate the word chemicals, but you're not having more chemicals in your coffee when you get it decaffeinated if you go for Swiss water decaf, which doesn't use those solvents, those kind of chemicals. The reason I hate the word chemicals is because chemicals can mean so many different things. Like technically water is a chemical and some chemicals aren't bad for us, but just for the sake of explaining things here, go for Swiss water decaf. Doesn't use a lot of solvents, which could be considered chemicals. Yeah, so I definitely learned the hard way. I can't drink coffee at all anymore. The other thing about coffee is it gives me heartburn. So if you have any heartburn, you're probably going to have to at least try switching to decaf. Even still, that might not work. It didn't work for me. So now I just kind of have cut out coffee completely for several years. I feel much better for it. The heartburn is not triggered. And also, I now don't even crave it. Up until recently, I kind of was like, oh, I would like a cup of coffee. But then I think about the aftertaste that coffee gives you, and I'm like, nah, it's just not something for me. All right, so just to recap, organic, mold, mycotoxin free by a third-party certification, potentially. Try to figure out, are you caffeine sensitive? Do you have anxiety? You should definitely look at going decaf, if not cutting out coffee and replacing it with something else like a tea. And then the fourth kind of consideration to talk about today is something I called coffee hygiene habits. So it has to do with timing and a bunch of different things. So the first thing, let's talk about timing. I would consider having you wait about an hour after waking before you have your coffee. There is a potential small impact that the caffeine may have on your cortisol. Your cortisol being something that helps you to wake up in the morning, gets you going, or in excessive amounts can potentially contribute to anxiety and things like that. But I'm thinking more about your circadian rhythm when I'm talking about having your coffee about an hour after waking up, where in the morning, so let's start at night actually. At night, when you're exposed to darkness, you start to produce melatonin because the darkness signals your brain through your eyes, saying that, okay, it's starting to become nighttime, it's starting to be dark out. Let's start to produce more melatonin so that we can get ready to be sleepy and go to bed. So then you get your melatonin and then you go to sleep. And in the morning, your melatonin starts to drop and then your cortisol starts to come up. And it's kind of like the sun rising. It's saying, all right, time to wake up, get out of bed. And that's what your cortisol does in the morning. It has a little bit of a spike to wake you up. So let's say if you are having coffee regularly, first thing in the morning, you roll out of bed, within 10 minutes, you're going to go drink your coffee, or within the hour, basically, you're going to go drink your coffee. Maybe it's going to spike your cortisol a little bit more, or maybe over time, your body starts to get a little bit of a spike from the cortisol from the caffeine, and then it decides that it doesn't have to produce its own cortisol anymore. And then you stop caffeine, or you don't have caffeine now and then your body's like, what did I do? I don't have enough cortisol being produced, because typically you give me this coffee caffeine boost of cortisol, but now I have to do it myself, or do I have to do it myself? It just kind of confuses the body. And so if you can just wait an hour, your body will have already had its full cortisol spike itself. It has its natural kind of circadian rhythm, and then your coffee won't be impacting it as much. And the other thing about timing is to avoid, especially if you're a slow metabolizer like myself, if you get anxiety, high blood pressure, sleep issues, you're going to want to avoid having caffeine or coffee like 10 to 12 hours before bedtime. So go calculate that out. You probably don't want to have it past noon, for example, at least. You don't want to have your afternoon pick me up coffee because that could potentially be impacting your sleep at night. It might be causing you to not be able to fall asleep as quickly, or it might be waking you up in the middle of the night. You might not be getting as deep of a sleep. So play around with the timing of your coffee because if you're having any sleep issues, that could be one of the factors, and it could be a big factor involved. They did research on med students, for example, and they showed that the med students who are presumably drinking a lot of coffee had a lot of sleep issues, and they chalked it up to the coffee because they would actually measure the caffeine in their blood and saw that the caffeine was in their blood like 10, 12 hours later. And that's why we came up with this timeline of 10 to 12 hours before bed that you would want to have consumed your last coffee. Like, don't consume coffee within 10 to 12 hours of bedtime. And then don't drink on an empty stomach as well, because that could potentially mess with your blood sugar regulation. It has to do with cortisol again, but overall, if we can get you to drink your coffee with some food, go for it. Now, I want you to take that information with like, I just look at it from a personal perspective, basically, because I know a lot of you love to do fasting, and we just say you have to balance the pros and the cons and the give and the take, basically. So if you are fasting, that is fantastic. We do love when people do at least a 13-hour overnight fast because that's like what's best researched, which can kind of be like, well, coffee doesn't really break your fast. Can I still have it in the morning? And then you might not have breakfast until a couple hours later, but you really want your coffee in the morning. And we're okay with that in most scenarios. Again, case by case basis, if we see someone with a lot of blood sugar dysregulation, if we can even do like continuous glucose monitoring or anything like that, if we see that your coffee then spikes your blood sugar, we might want to reconsider that and come up with some alternatives or a different schedule for fasting or whatever it might be. But I would say 95% of the time, I would rather people fast and have their coffee than mess up their fast, have their breakfast really early in order to kind of make sure that they have their coffee. There's like a give and take there for sure. And the last thing, which I think is probably a little bit intuitive to a lot of you, is just not to overload your coffee with a lot of or sugar in particular, or the creamers and the creamers that have a lot of fake sugars or additives and things like that in them. I would straight up prefer if someone did just like a regular dairy creamer, especially if they're overall reducing their dairy in their day to day, over doing one of those fancy flavored creamers. Now, there are some brands out there that are trying to switch things up, but and they're still okay, especially if you have a dairy kind of intolerance. But if we can just go whole foods as best as possible and not get too fancy into the I don't know, the creamers that are just full of a bunch of stuff. I can't even think of any brands of them right now, and I probably shouldn't talk about them anyway. But if we can just get a nice thick creamer, if that's what you prefer, sorry, cream, like a cow cream, then that's preferable over a lot of the potentially oat milk creamers or whatever they might be where they add a lot of stuff into them. Again, you have to kind of figure out what works best for you. If you generally eat really well, if you have intolerances to dairy, then they might be an okay option for you because your body can handle a little bit of the additives or whatever it might be if we set everything up really well. Or if your body can't handle the dairy, we probably want to go to something else if you just want to enjoy your coffee. There's definitely give and take in here. It's not black and white. It's not just set in stone that no person who has ever had cancer can never have this. We need to look at your whole picture and everything else that you're doing as well. And then sugar, a little bit can be fine, again, if we're just enjoying your coffee. But if you're having your coffee with sugar on an empty stomach, not a great combo. You're going to really put yourself on a blood sugar roller coaster. And people often ask me about honey or maple syrup. They're still sugars. They're still going to mess with your blood sugar a little bit. So if in a perfect world, if you could have a black coffee, go for it. Myself, I never liked black coffee. And don't they say that black coffee is the drink choice of serial killers or something like that? I don't judge you. My husband only drinks black coffee, and I don't think he's a serial killer. But from my perspective, I never found it very tasty. I used to put just a regular thick cream in it in order to give it a little bit of flavor, a break from the acidity of it. I enjoyed that very much. If you do have to put sugar in it, then consider having it with your meal. And then consider slowly over time reducing the amount of sugar you're putting in, because your taste buds might adapt over time too if you start adding less and less sugar. So those are my thoughts on coffee hygiene. Just to kind of recap the coffee hygiene. Don't try to wake up for about an hour before you have your coffee, because it might interfere with your circadian rhythm, your cortisol. Don't drink it on an empty stomach because it might mess with your blood sugar. Don't have it within 10 to 12 hours at bedtime because you might not be able to sleep as well. And then try not to add in too much sugar, too many fake creamers, things like that, because it just kind of tarnishes the benefit of the coffee. So why is coffee beneficial? It comes down to the polyphenols. There's something called chlorogenic acids, I believe is how you say it. There's these weird, funky words as well: cafestol, colwiol. There's just little different types of phytochemicals, just nutrients, because it's a plant, that are in the coffee that have antioxidant impacts. And antioxidants are really good for going and protecting your cells against damage that might be hitting them and causing them to turn into more cancerous cells. Helps your cells to heal better. Antioxidants help with being anti-inflammatory. So that's why we think that, especially when people are drinking so many cups of coffee on a regular basis, they're getting an antioxidant boost from their coffee, having a lot of benefits when it comes to helping to prevent cancer. It can also potentially support liver detox pathways. It's a very small kind of pathway, I'd say, that would have a benefit on. But overall, it's mainly the antioxidant impact from the coffee beans, the plants that's in it, that has this anti-cancer impact. So that's the big summary there as to why coffee has an impact on cancer. So that's pretty much what I've got for you today. Just to recap: organic, mold, mycotoxins, manage your caffeine sensitivity, and then perform those coffee hygiene habits. I tell you what, if you go over to Instagram, if you're on Instagram, I'm going to make a post and I'm going to tag the brands that we typically recommend or just are familiar with. We don't have any associations with them necessarily. It's just our clients are typically like, what coffee should I drink? And we go and do a little bit of research and we come back with these brands. I'll go tag them in the podcast clip that I'm going to do for this particular episode on coffee. And you can go you don't have to do as much research, I guess. You can go over there and see what brands do we typically recommend, because they're organic. They are mold, third-party certified. And then you have to deal with the timing of your coffee drinking, because I can't help you more than telling you what to do and tell you the impacts of and timings of when to drink your coffee. But that's all I've got for you today. I hope that was helpful. I hope that helps you to enjoy your coffee with confidence and not be afraid of it, because we want you to enjoy your life for sure. So here's to flourishing after cancer. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Flourish After Cancer podcast. If you loved this episode, please be sure to leave a review and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Sending all my best your way, Dr. Megan.